Riders of South East Queensland. We're back again for episode 2 of Mountain Biking in South East Queensland. I'm very pleased to be joined again by Oppy and a special guest. Oppy, how you doing?
Damp.
It's pretty wet here in South East Queensland at the moment. Trails are, they're needing a little bit more time at the moment of recording to dry out. But before we chat about maybe some tips in riding in wet weather, should we introduce our guest?
Well, we should note that poor Hubcap is under the weather today. So we have, although we have standby Andrew.
An alternative Andrew.
Alternative Andrew. Just as good. Sorry, Hubcap.
Yeah, we don't want to go bigger, better, more advanced Andrew.
More Andrews.
Old Andrew, how about that?
No, experienced.
Oh, maybe. I think probably Hubcap's got me in terms of hours on a mountain bike, though, so I would not regard myself as more experienced than Andrew Handyside on a mountain bike.
Is that right? Andrew Demack, everyone. Thank you for coming along tonight.
Oh, pleasure.
And you are...
And welcome.
Yeah, you do work for Bicycle Queensland.
Yes, I am the Director of Advocacy for Bicycle Queensland. So there you go. Sounds impressive. Don't ask me how many people I direct.
We are very honoured to have you here, and we know that you are a big part in... I called these two legends of mountain biking on the last podcast. I'm going to throw you in the same boat, purely based on you give a lot to the sport.
Thank you. I certainly wouldn't call myself a legend of mountain biking, but I'm happy to be described as somebody who's been involved in bike riding in Queensland for a couple of decades, and I very much enjoy what I do.
Yep. And I've been lucky enough to work alongside you, see you at races, and not just races, but advocacy for all kinds of things, but especially something we will be delving into tonight, which is rail trails in Queensland, South East Queensland, and further.
Yeah. I mean, your podcast is about mountain biking in South East Queensland, but certainly there's worlds to explore in the rail trail front. Leaving the southeast corner, there's heaps good stuff in the southeast corner.
Yeah,
but the chances to explore beyond, I think, are there, and they are pretty exciting.
I think we're going to throw Oppy's borderline of up towards Gympie as Southeast Queensland out the window tonight and talk a little bit further north, perhaps. On the screen behind Oppy there is a picture from one of BQ's and the Boyne Burnett Inland Rail Trail organisation. Their event from May this year, and that was a pretty special one, but a little bit further north. Yeah. Before we talk, and that event as well was quite a wet one. Oppy, you want to jump into tips for riding in the wet weather, riding/not riding? What's the balance?
Yeah, I mean, it will date this podcast, but hopefully wet weather riding tips, always valuable. I actually got some questions on one of the South East Queensland mountain biking forums about, is it too wet to ride? Can I ride here? So I thought it's an opportunity while it is so ringing wet to kind of give, top 3 wet weather riding tips. So I'll launch into 3 of mine.
Please
just
do.
for it. So mountain biking specific, if it's deep enough that if it's soft enough that your wheels are leaving ruts in the ground, it's too wet. Turn around and call it a day. That being said, probably know your trail networks. There are some places in South East Queensland that, Daisy Hill in particular, have lots of clay, lots of low-lying areas, and they just don't handle saturation. What can be a 30, 40 centimetre wide single track can turn into a 2 metre wide bog hole with people going round and round puddles and just churning the soil up. It takes a lot of time to restore those things. It damages the environment. So, if you're living wheel ruts, that's not the place to go. Mm-hmm. Castle Hill is always the wet weather favourite. Mm-hmm. It's highly eroded. It's already down to
the rock.
Down to the rocks. Yeah, it erodes bikes, not trails. And the other one I'd say is get some mud guards. A tail guard. Something on the front. I do a lot of riding to work as well, and I've got some lovely neoprene booties that I will put over. It just stops my shoes from getting absolutely saturated. Means I can ride again the next day. So they're my top wet weather trip.
Yeah, I think certainly if you're on the road, mud guards are a great thing for commuters. They're not cool. You don't look cool with mudguards, but your feet stay dry. And a surprising amount of the wet you get when you're riding in the rain, when it's wet, comes off the road rather than from the sky. So if you can keep your feet dry, you're a happy camper, I think, at the end of the ride. My not local, but my most favourite mountain bike network is Daisy. So if it's been raining, I just go for a gravel ride. I like Glider Forest and Sergeant Dan Stiller Reserve as a place to link up a gravel ride when it's been a bit wet. So
Yeah, so they're Brisbane City Council natural areas along the Logan Motorway corridor. There's lots of gravel opportunities down and through that area. I think they're all shared trails.
Look, you very rarely see anybody else in there to share with. If there were more people to share with in there, I'd be happy. But normally if I've gone for a spin through there, you don't see anybody for the entire ride, which is kind of nice, Solitude. It's not like being in Daisy.
No. So, well, you've circumvented one of my questions, which was, what's your favourite trail network? But before we get to that, have you got any wet weather tips?
No, respect the signage.
Yeah.
Respect the signage. There's a reason that sign's been put there. If you're not sure, if it's been left up a few days after the sun has come out and dried the puddles, double check before you go in and ride. But that's it from me, yeah. Shall we jump into... I'm keen to hear from Andrew.
Yeah, so
those few questions. Let's start with favourite trail network.
And why? If you've got a why?
Well, I think I'd have to say Daisy Hill, just because when I first got into mountain biking, I was in a group that rode there every Wednesday, and I learned a lot from all those guys. And I rode with that group for a solid 5 years or so, and that was every Wednesday morning at 6 o'clock at the duck pond, and there was always somebody there. So it was a big enough group that somebody would show up and you'd have somebody to go for a ride with, and we had 3 or 4 standard loops we used to do that would be about an hour, and so you'd still get almost to work on time. And so I really learned a lot about how to ride single track and about all sorts of stuff. This was I was probably from about 2006 to maybe 2011, so about that sort of time period. My first mountain bike and my second mountain bike were both bought when I was riding with that group. So, yeah.
What was your first mountain bike?
It was a Gary Fisher hardtail. I can't tell you it's the model name because I don't remember. But then I bought a...
Hooky. They had some crazy,
some weird
crazy names.
And then I bought a Haro, which was a weird thing. And I actually broke the rear... What's the rear triangle called?
Chainstay, dropouts?
No, it cracked at the sort of pivot sort of thing.
Oh, it was a dual suspension.
Yeah, yeah. And so I did
back in your free ride days.
It was still at Daisy, so I don't think there was any free riding going on.
Into the quarry.
Down
No. Oh. The duck pond is Underwood Park on Underwood Road from memory.
That's right. Yeah.
That's kind of the northwestern corner of the network. So
are we talking the duck pond just over the road from Daisy Hill, like where the BMX and the skate park
Underwood
is?
Park, yeah.
So it's kind of like the alternate entrance into Daisy, because you go past all the informal trails that are Chockputter and whatever that little loop in there that was pretty well used at the time. It's kind of changed and closed down a bit since then, but that was part of what the loops we used to do. And then over the step over into Daisy itself, I do recall seeing a couple of riders in that group who could bunny hop that step over. As something I have never attempted and would never attempt, but it was impressive to see. And when you see that happen, you go, "Oh, I don't know anything about this sport. Here are people who do know what they're doing. I better just sort of sit quiet and learn a bit."
But that's one of the great things. It's like a group of such a vast range of skills and abilities, all riding together, having a great time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the social attraction is always, quite high.
There was one memorable Wednesday morning at Daisy Hill because there was a lot of chat as well. You'd ride a trail, stop and have a chat. And one of our other guys who was that morning going for a run rather than a ride, Mark Razi, do you know Mark?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So he's out for a run, right? And he runs past the the Wednesday morning group standing on the side of the trail having a chat. And we ride a trail, we pass Mark again, and he catches us before we finish our neck. So all over Daisy Hill that morning, Razi would catch us at each point, and we'd be still having a chat, and he'd have something to say, of course, and then we'd continue on. It was a very funny morning. Yeah,
it's interesting. It shows the travel speed for trail runners. They're actually very close to recreational mountain biking, and they coexist quite well as shared users.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say that when you start getting into those high volume shared use networks, single direction trails start to reduce the number of interactions and the speed at which those interactions arrive. So,
I think that would make sense. I mean, in Daisy, but we don't have that. But there's like almost conventions of which way trails should be ridden. Often people don't take any notice of that, but there are certainly trails in Daisy that work better one direction than the other. But
I think that's trails and the future of trails in South East Queensland for another episode.
Certainly. I want to throw back to Andrew. Andrew, you sort of undersold your technical skills before when it comes to mountain biking. You say your favourite place is Daisy to ride mountain bike, but I think from the couple of years since we have formally met and I've known you, I think I've seen a lot of different things come from you. We're friends on Facebook. And, there's a photo behind you of you on the rail trail, at the adventure crossing of the rail trail. I've seen that you've done all kinds of adventures. Last time there was an opening of a rail trail. I think you rode 6 days or something to get there. And I was just searching your name in my catalogue of photos, and I think you popped up in an enduro race at Toowoomba.
Yes, I did a couple of gravity enduros in its early phase. I think that when full-face helmets were required, I think that's when I bowed out. I think I borrowed a full-face helmet from a friend for the one at Toowoomba where we were at Jubilee Park, and I think that was my last gravity enduro because I kind of worked out if this needs a full-face helmet, like I'm on a cross-country bike, I was on a 120 mils of travel, a 26er, and I think it was probably at the limits of my capabilities.
It looked great on the bike. I saw the photos.
I think was that like a state champs or something at Jubilee? Anyway,
got a strange feeling it was like their Rock Shocks Enduro Challenge, which may have been the year that they had Richie Rood and Jared Graves riding.
Yeah, so Graves was there, and I remember talking to Oppy and being on the track at the same time, roughly as and you were talking to Graves anyway. So my vague memory was I'd been down this trail, and I looked at the times afterwards of what my time was and what Oppy's time, and like Oppy's a minute faster than me on a trail that's like 2Ks long, and Graves is another 30 or 40 seconds faster than that. And so I'm going. I have no. Once again, I was understanding my place in the order of things, and we did a state champs there that I was in Masters 4 or 5 or whatever, and there were maybe 8 people in that category, and I finished 7th.
Ooh.
But only because the dude who was much faster than me had absolutely axed himself on the first trail and didn't complete the course. Whereas I completed the course at least.
Completion on anything, anything that's out of your depth. I mean, for a lot of people, that's out of reach. Like the enduros they were pretty hairy. Some of them. They are.
I think that was a real turning point in the sport. It was very much in its origin about you had to ride to the top and then ride back down, and it was accessible, and there were lots of people on cross country bikes, and then the sport really took a turn towards the Enduro World Series. It got serious. The promoters here were working up towards hosting a World Series event in Australia, and it changed. I enjoyed the early days of enduro, and one of the reasons I don't do a lot of enduro now is it's become multi-run downhill. It's getting beyond me, and I'm like, unless you're riding downhill all the time and keep those skills sharp, it's not for me anymore.
That's where I think there's some branches now of different races that have different levels of that, how technical. And, whether you call it enduro or superflow or whatever it may be, there's sort of different levels for everyone, and there's quite a few events on the race calendar to choose
I think
from.
the Rocky Trails network or series of events. So the Enduros have got hard enough now that there's actually space underneath for
something else that's a bit like the original.
That's a bit more participatory. It's inclusive, and it's not as targeted at your upper end. So there's room for both. There's growth there.
But if you were to sort of wind back and look at the photos that you've got of me, which I think would be few and far between, but my main I'm not competitive, cycle sport is cyclocross. And so that's not mountain biking, but you've got me on my cyclocross bike there. And if you were to ask me what's my favourite form of bike riding, it's cyclocross. I think it's great fun. It's very silly. It's the wrong bike for the wrong purpose, and it's very much about participation and about kids and about making sure that everybody's having a good time. And it's not at all about how fast the elites are. In fact, the elites get a lot of heckling for being too fast. I really enjoy cyclocross, and if anybody's out there and has never tried cyclocross, we have like a sort of usually a 4 or 5 race series in Queensland every year, and it's run by various clubs, and it's heaps of fun. So,
I think one of the things that's so attractive about cyclocross, it happens in a small area, so it's very spectator friendly.
Yes.
It's typically low speed, so low consequence if you do fall over.
Yep.
Grass, mud, dirt, a little bit of bitumen here and there.
It's a aerobic test as well. It's hard work.
Anaerobic.
Oppy's done quite a lot of cyclocross races, and he's usually takes the whole shot and he's up the front for the first couple of laps, and then
first lap prime. Just after that.
We're all like that, by the way. I haven't taken many hole shots in C grade, but I've been up the front in C grade for the first half a lap quite a few times.
I've raced the great Robbie McEwen at a cyclocross at Nunda, I remember him lapping me, and he was in the big chain ring just motoring through the grass effortlessly. And I could not hold his wheel. I just went, wow, look at him, what a legend.
I remember the first day that Robbie showed up for a cyclocross event. It was actually at Bolocross, which we had at, do you remember Pushies Galore? Was it at Holland Park Bowls Club? And Pushies Galore was an event that was like a show and shine for bikes. Bring along the bike that you want to show people. And we had the cyclocross as part of the second day of that, and raced around a bowls club.
Cool.
And for some reason, Robbie McEwen showed up, and we're going, it's kind of like if you had a backyard cricket game and Steve Waugh showed up, right?
Yeah.
And we go, what's going on? It was very strange. But there was a little, from the bowling green, there was a bank that we made the course go up, and it was designed so that you had to run up it, right? So there was the step up from the bowling green to the edge of the bowling green, and that's like maybe a step up like that, and then straight up a bank. McEwen very quickly worked out that he could ride that. He could just pop up onto the bank and just whoop, straight up, and everybody else was running it. Yeah, not for Robbie.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you remember your first race?
Well, we had a cyclocross race as part of Bike Week in 2009 or 2008. That Peter Cray helped us put on.
Was it at the RNA Showground?
No, at Davies Park, South Brisbane.
Oh.
But I don't think I raced at that because I was running the event.
First ever race, though. Have you raced before that?
No.
I
wasn't a bike rider. I played a lot of soccer when I was younger, and so I wasn't really into biking as a sport. I was using bike riding as a way of getting around. And so, I would say probably my first race would have been an epic.
That's a throwback to last episode.
It may be 06 epic. Yeah.
There you go.
On that Gary Fisher.
So 06. So was that the point-to-point still?
Yeah, I did maybe 3 of them.
There's a common theme here. Have you ever done the epic?
No, I would probably have ridden every trail in some of those epics and, scoped them out and ridden them during events. But so I can piece them together into an epic, but I can't say I've done the
point-to-point epic had like 2 or 3 big hills. One of them was Lachie Gap, was it?
There's Laidley Gap.
Laidley Gap.
Red.
And the Razorback.
Cup, and the Razorback, yeah. This huge. I was saying in the previous episode that I went out and actually this year went back to the original course to go and ride some of the climbs to see how does it compare to the current course. And there was virtually no single track in the original epic. A little section on the Bicentennial National Trail that ran through Marmark Creek, and it was more or less cow paddock and heifer highway, we used to call it. Cow pad, beaten by the hooves of a 1,000 burgers.
But then a little bit as you got into Old Hidden Vale at the end.
Right at the end. Yeah. After you'd done the slight false flat climb through the grass paddock that just about killed people after 100 Ks.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's great.
Going back to your involvement in the scene.
Yes.
It's very obvious that you are someone who's really passionate about the sport because of the amount of times I've seen you volunteering, organising get-togethers, doing things for the love of it. You obviously love riding.
Yeah. Oh, I think bikes are cool. I think that bikes bring people together. I think there's lots of positive things about bike riding. Like there's all the benefits transport-wise for active transport and getting people healthy and all that sort of stuff. But apart from that, I just think bike riding is a fun thing that is a social thing, and I think brings people together and creates community and has a whole lot of benefits that I experience, and I'd love to see more people experiencing. And I'm kind of a overly earnest kind of person anyway. Do you know what I mean? I have a tendency to sort of get excited about stuff and say, "Oh, we should do this." And quite often, if you're that sort of person, if that thing doesn't already happen and you want it to happen, well, you go, "Well, let's see if we can make it happen." And so, I have just a tendency to sort of leap in and say, "Why don't we ride to the opening of a rail trail?"
Yeah.
I mean, I'd ride if it was a bikeway that was opening in Brisbane, I'd ride to it. You want to show up on your bike, and I'll be kind of stuffed when they open the next section of rail trail in Atherton because I won't be able to ride to that. But where I can ride to the opening of something, I want to do that. Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Well, I think you can combine public transport really well with cycling. As a schoolboy, I remember catching the train to Bundaberg to do a school kids bike tour in Bundaberg.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they don't let you bring your bike on the tilt train.
Oh.
This is one of many of the sort of minor campaign things we've worked on over time, and we're not winning that one.
So I vaguely recall sending my bike by freight.
Yep.
And then getting on the
Yeah. And so one time when we finished a ride in Gladstone, and I was getting the train actually wasn't. Yeah, it was a tilt train from Gladstone back to Brisbane. Yeah, we had to freight our bikes. So anyway,
well, some more advocacy in that space.
Yeah, Queensland Rail has many problems, and bikes are just one of them.
Speaking of rail,
yeah.
Shall we
Thanks
jump
for
in?
keeping us on track.
On track.
Hey, I got the first pun of the episode.
Rail trails is our topic because, and you are the man, well, in my opinion anyway, to talk about rail trails with. Should we start with your favourite rail trail?
Oh, what's my favourite rail trail? It's like having a favourite child. I don't have a favourite rail trail.
Top three.
Top three in
Anywhere.
Top three. Just, you don't have to pick favourites. You can have three.
Look, I'm tremendously impressed by what the Northern Rivers Rail Trail is achieving. And if I want to have a top three, I'm going to have them in it because they're doing amazing stuff. So the Northern Rivers Rail Trail at the moment goes from Murwillumbah to Crabs Creek, and another section goes from Casino to Lismore. And eventually they'll join up Lismore to somewhere south of Crabs Creek. But because that's a multi-council thing, so it's Tweed Shire Council, Tweed Valley or Tweed, I'm not sure what the name of the council is, from Murwillumbah to Crabs Creek, and they're a pretty wealthy council. And then it's Richmond Valley Council doing the Casino to Lismore, and maybe Lismore is also a council. Anyway, but it's Byron Shire Council that hasn't done its bit yet. And so we're very hopeful that that will occur soon. So anyway, Northern Rivers Rail Trail I'd put as one of my top 3. I don't think Paul Heyman's listens to this podcast, so I could probably miss out the BVRT because everybody knows all about the BVRT already. If I talk about that, it's kind of redundant, even though pictures of me on it.
We've given you 3. You could just...
The Boyne Burnett Inland Rail Trail is one of my favourites, and our picture over there shows Galemble, which is in the tunnel section. There's 2 sections, so there's this huge arc that if you took from the main coastline at Maryborough and carved an arc around through inland Queensland and rejoined the main line at Gladstone, that arc is what the Boyne Burnett Trail is based on. Now, bits of that are inaccessible for rail trail because they're owned by somebody else. So from Mungar near Maryborough all the way to Gayndah, it's owned by Isasugar or leased by Isasugar, so we won't be getting a rail trail on that section. We won't, sadly. But from Gayndah back to the coast is all available for development. And so Gayndah to Mundubbera is open now, or actually... It's actually Mount Debatable to Mundubbera because reasons to do with bridges, and that's the bridges section of the Boyne Burnett Inland Rail Trail. And then from near Kalpower, actually a place called Barrymoon, a siding called Barrymoon at the top of the range between the range that goes from near Monto back down into the Boyne Valley. If you can imagine where that is, not many people can, but that's the section that has Galemble on it. That's the tunnel section of the Boyne Burnett Rail Trail, and that's just a magical place. You ride through the tunnels on your way down the hill, and every time you come out, there's 6.
I think it's 6
tunnels, and every time you ride through a tunnel, you come out. There's this amazing view over this valley, and across the other side is Crumbit Tops, which is a rainforest area. It's just so spectacular. If it's been raining, it's even better because it's green. And so when we were there in May, it's just a beautiful place to be. It's a long way from nowhere. The nearest town is Monto, which is about 70 k's away, something like that. And the other direction back to Gladstone or back to Calliope is maybe 80 or 90 k's. So it's a place you got to drive to ride, but it is pretty spectacular.
That's a draw card, in my opinion. That it's out.
Oh, true.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, I love the fact that if it's remote, it's more of an adventure.
So yeah, the Boyne Burnett is certainly in my top 3, and yeah, maybe we'll put the BVRT in my top 3 as well.
My only reservation about the Northern Rivers Rail Trail, if they finish it all, it'll be longer than the BVRT, and it will steal the title of the longest rail trail in Australia.
What's the most pointless title you can have is the longest. What's the most fun one? What's the most interesting one? What's the one with the best cafe? I don't really care how long it is.
Best grocery.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on that, facilities on rail trails, would the Boyne Burnett benefit from having a hut-style intermediary, like New Zealand in their tramping huts, it's a network of maintained things that enable people to explore those longer distant routes.
I think that the way rail trails occur kind of almost depends on the towns themselves being revitalised. And so what I would think would be more likely on the Boyne Burnett is over time, as it gets more usage and it becomes more successful, that some of the little sidings would re-emerge as places. So, for instance, Many Peaks, which is a little tiny town in between Kalpower and Bullion, there is now the pub there has reopened, and it's reopened directly from the rail trail. So that's a sort of one of the signs that a rail trail will bring new life to those communities. So Kalpower and Bullion and Ubobo and Naguran, all these little towns along the way, as the rail trail becomes more successful, places to stay and places to eat will start to emerge. So that, I think, is more likely than the hut, simply because the what used to be there were sidings where there were towns. So Glenville's never had a town, as far as I know. It was just a siding in the, that they must have sort of shipped cattle to. But Many Peaks was a town, and in fact had a mine. I forget what they mined. Quite a lot of times when you go through on rail trails, you go through where all these sidings, and there'll be a explanatory sign that says, "Oh, we had a mine here. We dug up all whatever it was that we were trying to do, and by the time the rail line got there, the mine was closed," and that sort of thing. There's one of those on the Kingaroy to Kilkievan trail where there's a siding. Cinnabar is the name of the place, and the stuff they were digging out of the ground was something to do with the name Cinnabar. People can look up and find out what Cinnabar is, but it's kind of a metal or a chemical or something that they needed. And by the time the rail line came through there, they dug up all the stuff already. Same for Kilkievan. Kilkievan, they were putting the railway line through there because there was gold. They dug up all the gold before the railway line got there. Sorry, I'm going all over the place now.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
I think it's Glassford Mine. Does that ring a bell?
Glassford Mine is the one that we went to, through all the creek crossings.
Yeah, that was good fun.
Yeah.
Just quickly, outside of Australia or outside of our little realm that we're talking about, do you have a favourite other rail trail that you've been to?
No, I haven't been on rail trails overseas yet.
No,
I've ridden quite a few in Victoria. I've ridden just the one in New South Wales. I've ridden a couple in South Australia, but I haven't, and a couple in Western Australia, but I haven't haven't been to New Zealand to ride the famous trail there.
Yeah.
But
Central Otago.
Yeah. I haven't hardly ridden a bike in New Zealand at all, apart from doing the Lake Taupo road ride, and I've spent a day at Rotorua, so that's about it. But there's amazing rail trails everywhere. You probably know that in the US they've established a route called the Great American Rail Trail that's going to run from Washington DC to Washington State, Seattle, and it's about 55% complete already, just from existing trails they're piecing together. And so they've got a map that shows you can ride from DC across the country and connect up rail trails for, I don't know how many thousand miles that is, but it's a long way.
For those few people sitting back listening going, what exactly is a rail trail? Just if there's anyone wondering. I mean, we sort of know, but where does it start? I mean, and there's also a process to getting a rail trail made. Do you give your... Well,
so in the 18th and 19th century, the sort of age of the railways, we built railway lines across Australia in all sorts of places, trying to link up towns. Sort of the heyday of railway building was probably about from the turn of the century into the 20th century through to about 1930. And since then, building new railway lines has mostly been uneconomic. There's a very sad tale of between Yarraman and Nanango. So the Brisbane Valley line, which left at Wulkuraka at Ipswich and goes all the way up to Yarraman, and then there's the line that comes from Theebine, where it departed the main coastline, which is just sort of north of Gympie, and that line came back through to Kingaroy and actually to Nanango. Although the rail trail doesn't go to Nanango, but the rail line did, but they never connected up Nanango and Yarraman. And so, was
their land purchased?
No, there was a lot of pressure, public pressure at the time to connect those up, and the local people wanted to do this. This is, I think they finished the line to Yarraman in the 20s, and the line to Nanango about the same time, and just never connected enough, and they were still wanting to do this right through to the 1950s, but they never found the money, and then obviously it became uneconomic, and both those lines obviously later on closed, and we have rail trails there, but we don't have rail trail connecting all the way through. So basically disused railway lines, and so there are disused railway lines that still are railway corridors owned by the government right across Queensland. There's a lovely man who works for Transport and Main Roads called Craig England, who is the manager of rail corridors. And luckily for us, he is an absolute rail trail enthusiast. and does magnificent work in making sure that that local communities are able to use these corridors to build new trails. So yeah, that's basically the outline of what a rail trail is. How do you get your rail trail, your disused rail corridor, from being a disused rail corridor into a rail trail? Well, that's the sort of $64 million question, because one of the things that happens in the 15 to 20 years after a rail line closes, there's community grief because they've lost relevance. You know, you can't get the train to that place anymore. And so there's a lot of grief around that. And then somebody says, what we should use the railway line for is a heritage railway, right? And heritage railways are a fantastic and expensive idea that might bring tourists. They might bring a lot of tourists, but they do tend to be pretty resource intensive, because what you're basically doing is keeping alive a railway line that wants to die. And then eventually they go, maybe the heritage railway isn't going to work, let's turn it into a rail trail. I think that process takes at least 20 years from when a railway line closes to when it's possible to turn it into a rail trail. Mm-hmm. And a rail trail is simply remove the iron rails themselves and put down a surface that you can ride along. And if you do it well, you can have that for both bike riders and walkers and horse riders. I think in far too many places we've disallowed the horse use. I think that's almost always a bad idea. There's a couple of times where you can understand why that's happened. If it's really close to an urban area, it's smart to use a railway line for transport purposes, and making those bitumen makes sense. But I think there are vanishingly few opportunities for horse riders to be able to take use their chosen recreational vehicle, if you like. And so I think allowing them on rail trails is a good idea. That's my view. That's a personal view. Probably not a Bicycle Queensland view, but anyway.
Fair.
We'll have to speak to Horse Queensland. Actually,
Australian Trail Riders Association.
ATHRA?
Yeah, ATHRA. Really nice people. Yeah. Have dealt with them a lot.
Yeah, Claire's working on their new Go Slow, Say Hello.
Yeah.
For horse riders and cyclists meeting and walkers.
And so, to circle back to, if you like, the history of how rail trails get developed, the state government had a brainwave in the Bligh government era that they were going to spend money on trails, and the Fernvale to Somerset section of the BVRT already existed, that had been opened by Somerset Council in maybe about 2003, 2004. And the Blackbutt Shire at the time had the idea to do the Linville to Blackbutt section of the trail, and that must have got into somebody's head at state government, and they said, we'll spend enough money to build that whole trail. And it did take quite a while, and they did stall for maybe 4 or 5 years as well. So they'd built pretty much Woolkaraka to Goolawah, and from Linville to, from Moore to Yarraman. Mm-hmm. Actually, Moore to Blackbutt was open well before. The section up to Yarraman seemed to take a few years as well. Okay. But there was this gap between Toogoolawah and Moore, which was, they'd run out of all the money that had been allocated in the Bligh government area. And had no plans to do that, and that's pretty much where Paul Heymans and his group in Somerset sort of basically fired up the local council and said, you guys can do better, and they started looking for money, and they got money from the feds for that, which was great. So it was about 2018 when they finished it. So
that was the infamous stock route bypass from Toogoolawah.
Yes.
Which
wasn't that infamous. It was pretty fun.
Well, we talked about it last episode, but I think that that made the rail trail a connected corridor, and that's what had the first end-to-end events, which helped publicise and popularise the corridor, and it's gone from strength to strength. And you can see the economic revitalisation of a lot of those little towns.
Absolutely.
It's a success story, and one that, you can demonstrate for other places, and hopefully they can take that on board. And
yeah, I mean, it's a success story, but it's a success story really close to Brisbane, and so duplicating its success does it depend on the availability of 1.5 million people to come and ride it, is really the tricky question for all the trails that are further out, because the level of investments required to build a rail trail kind of doesn't matter where that is. It's still about the same quantum of money. And so, for instance, Bundaberg Council had received a theoretical grant to do their rail trail from Bundaberg to Gin, and it has a really complicated bridge that's part of that. And they kind of looked at it. They put in for the money, then they looked at how they were going to actually do this rail trail, and they basically said to the state, "Oh, we don't think we can. Here's the money back." And so for them, the economic case didn't stack up because they had this really expensive bit that they thought they had to do. Now, from my perspective, from BQ's perspective, we would have much preferred they just sort of routed around that bridge and built a rail trail that doesn't, you don't need all the expensive things to make it a success. It just needs to be there so people can use it. And in fact, that's the BVRT story as well. It took a long time to get to its current state where there are bridges being replaced and all that sort of thing. That momentum took at least 10 years to be created by the use of the rail trail, to be created by people using it on a regular basis. And really, it getting finished almost required that amount of pressure from people saying, we want to ride it, we want to do it. So, I think there's still challenges ahead for the trails that are not in the absolute southeast corner. So Kingaroy to Kilkevin, it's finished and it's open and it's really rideable. But one section of it is much better than the other section, and that's just to do with mismatch of sort of council priorities. So South Burnett Council made the rail trail a really big priority, got on board with it. They're having the success. They're seeing the revitalisation of your Wandais and Tinguras and Memorambis, all these places where businesses are coming into being that weren't there before. Gympie Council hasn't seen it yet, and I think we're working with them. And we'd really love them to get on board a bit more. I suspect there's something about it being in the old Kilkevin Shire. I suspect that there's Gympie Council hasn't really got the same level of interest in the totality of its local government area. That's just a suspicion. But certainly the section from Mergen to Kilkevin is not as good as the section from Mergen back to Kingaroy. And I think over time we have to try and address that. And we'd love to see from Kilkevin through to Theebine completed, because that's actually some really spectacular countryside. There's that bridge, the Dickerbrand Bridge. I don't know if you know about this bridge, but there's a bridge at a place called Miver where it crosses must be the Mary River, I suspect. The Mary River's everywhere. Crosses the Mary River, and it's still existing bridge that is still in use for car traffic, and it's got the railway line and the section for cars right beside it in the one bridge, and it's a timber bridge, and it's absolutely spectacular bridge, and it's maybe 20 metres above the Mary River at that point. It's really worth seeing, and that's on that line through to Theebine. There's a couple of other places where the bridge doesn't exist, and other sort of creek crossings, which would make it a bit more challenging. But yeah, we'd love to see that one worked on as well. The South Burnett Rail Trail Group is pushing for that, and we're supporting them. And just recently, you might have heard that the Mary Valley Rail Trail, which goes at the moment just a little sort of stubby section from Brillu to Imbil, has had a favourable feasibility study, and they're going to push that one through to Kandanga, which is great. It'd be great to see that go all the way to Gympie. So
I have ridden that one.
Yes, that little trail as it is.
Yeah, I did I can't even remember the event out there, and we finished off with that some sort of alley cat.
All right.
But what is it for you that makes a rail trail special?
I just think it's so accessible to any sort of rider. It's usually away from the city. It's usually away from the cars, or it's almost always away from the cars. And so it's kind of introduction to mountain biking sort of stuff. It's kind of get away from get away from seeing cycling as something you have to do in competition with cars, and just enjoy cycling through the countryside. And it's so easy. It's anybody can do it. From 6-year-old to 96-year-old, anybody can ride along a rail trail. I just think it opens up opportunity for people.
It certainly reflects my experience. Safe, accessible, enjoyable, and probably the most unique thing that I found on a rail trail. You suddenly go, oh, all the traffic noise is gone. Like when you're in close proximity riding on a road, even if it's on a bike path or a bike lane, you're constantly in that sphere of noise. And suddenly out on the rail trail, all you've got is just the crunching of gravel under your tyres.
Isn't that a great sound?
The wind in your hair, magpies on your ears.
I said on the last podcast, for me with mountain biking, sometimes when I go shoot events, it's that sitting in the bush being it's peaceful. And I didn't mention specifically, but it's particularly like when I'm out, even Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, just walking along to get into a section or riding along and sitting there. And there are so many, like you said, bridges, different funky bridges, old, breaking down bridges, and the range. Brisbane Valley Rail Trail has a lot of fairly similar ones. There's the Lachie Creek one, which is a nice big one, which we said, last podcast, that's the one you used to ride down before they decked the top of it.
Yep.
But even up at Mount Debatable through to Mundubbera section, when we looked at the bridges there that may not have been decked yet, but they were
they're pretty special.
Very special.
That section has some sort of special engineering heritage listing because of the different variety of bridges. There's like 8 bridges in that area, and they're not bridges across the Burnett River. They're bridges across the creeks that run into the Burnett River, because the sort of geological formation is that there's all these deep creeks that they had to get across, and that's where the rail line had to be, because it couldn't be any further sort of east, because there was a massive plateau there that they couldn't get up onto. And so they had to go through that area, but that meant they had to do a lot of bridges to make it work. And there's like some sort of special engineers heritage register that those bridges are on. There's some apocryphal story that what's the guy's name at Gayndah? Mike Goebel had told me about that the chief engineer of railways at the time had all these bright young blokes working for them, and he said, okay, you get a bridge each. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's a great story that all these guys were working on their bridges, and each one came up with a different solution for how to cross their little their little ravine. So there's one of them that's like an upside down bridge. Have you seen that one?
No,
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you just Google, I suppose it's
on that section.
On that section, it's because it's not between Mount Debatable and Mundubbera. It's back towards Gayndah from there, so it's in the bit that you don't get to ride.
Oh, yes, okay.
So I think the structure is in tension rather than compression. So from memory, it's
an arch underneath.
Yeah. It's upside down.
Yeah, it's weird. It looks really odd, and so I don't understand how that works.
Well,
I'm not an engineer.
Yeah. So the infrastructure is part of the experience. The heritage is
heritage for sure. And I think it's about the European history of where we live. It's about what the people before us did, good, bad, or wonderful, to Queensland. And so it helps us understand where we come from and, maybe where we're going. I don't know. But it helps us understand where we come from for sure.
So a lot of, livestock, timber, minerals, all of these things is what opened the train lines.
Yep.
And now it's the people's time,
Yes. I mean, all of those... all the need for freight hasn't disappeared. In fact, you experience the need for freight when you drive to the rail trails, because there's still plenty of freight going around. But we've taken it off the railways.
One of the other probably definitive experiences for me on a rail trail is, and we talked a little bit about this last week, was mountain biking. For me, mountain biking is single track. That's the epitome of that experience. And it's intimate, all encompassing, and it's a close proximity. What I really enjoy about the rail trail experience is views and vistas and having the landscape on scroll, because you can cross valleys and mountain ranges, ride over the horizon on a rail trail. That's one of the things that I love the most about Brisbane Valley Rail Trail is going, there's that distant peak, and then you're at that peak and you're at the next town. And really it's a macro experience as opposed to a micro experience.
Yeah, I understand that. That makes sense to me, and I totally agree. And I think that it's not really anything like mountain biking, is it? It's not anything like single track. It's a different thing. It's its own thing that I think is still pretty cool. It's never going to replace single track, but it's its own thing that I think is still pretty fun. Yeah.
So I know on a really intense technical mountain bike track, you have focused on the content of the trail. On a rail trail, I'm quite often not looking at the surface. I'm looking at, and I like that because I can look up and not worry about falling over a log or a rock or getting caught in a rut. I can look at the landscape.
Have you ever done one of those mountain bike trails that describes itself as epic and is like a whole day one where there's elements that are scenic as well as elements that are single track? Have you done the Mount Buller Epic Trail?
No.
It's kind of funny because you're getting both. So the Mount Buller Epic that goes from Mount Buller around Stonefly and whatever it is, but comes down a massive descent to whatever the village is that's at the bottom of Mount Buller. You get to stop and see all these vistas, and then you get to do the single track as well. So maybe that's the best of both worlds. I don't know, but it's pretty cool.
It's on my list because the Nationals are down there this year.
Ah, right.
Nice.
At Mount Buller.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, you do that epic trail. It's super cool.
After the event. Probably.
So it's the Delatite River, but what's the name of the town? Anyway, there's a little village at the bottom. If you come down Delatite River Trail, it finishes there. But also, so does the epic. Here I'm gesturing around the mountains of Mount Buller.
That's all right. I was doing the same thing last week, mentally mapping the trail centres of Brisbane.
But yeah, it's very cool, and it's like a 7K downhill into this little town.
I've done the Delatite trail back in the early 2000s when I raced a national downhill down there back in the day.
Yep.
26-inch wheels.
Yep.
Now, Andrew, we like to ask the tough questions.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
And I'll lead into it with a little story. It's a similar vein to what we were just talking about, but my introduction to the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail was early days. I've known someone who is a unicyclist for quite a long time, similar age to yourself, Andrew, and if anyone used to work in the Brisbane city and saw someone going to work over the Goodwill Bridge on a unicycle, Sean Bennett was the guy. Mm-hmm. And I was friends with him on Facebook, and he posted a YouTube video of riding his unicycle out on the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail. And he added his narration and commentary to his videos, semi-professional or amateur, semi-amateur maybe. But his videos were very descriptive, and it got me hooked on what is this place, and, I should go check it out. Middle of nowhere. It looked like the middle of nowhere, piqued my interest. But some of his complaints were, my God, the amount of gates. Can you imagine getting off a unicycle and opening a gate and walking through and closing it every couple of kilometres.
Early days
on a 161 kilometre trail. But I got into it because of him and went out and checked it out. And there was, back then, yes, there were more gates. There were more big chunky rocks everywhere, and I was on a smaller bike. And so you felt it.
Yeah.
There were less decked bridges, more diversions.
Or going down into the gully and climbing out the other side.
Yeah. But I have awesome memories of that. Where is the line drawn where it's an adventure trail versus accessible for people?
Well, let me tell you about who I work for. I work for a mob called Bicycle Queensland, and our motto is more people cycling more often. And so when I look at it, I go, how can we get more people to experience this? And so from my point of view, the better the trail is, the more bridges get fixed, the more smooth surfaces we have, the more people will ride it, and that's pretty clear, and that's pretty well established, not just on the BVRT, but at every rail trail around Australia. You improve the rail trail, and more people ride it. And so for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. And I think there's a million places in Australia to experience adventure on your bike, and some of them are really close to the BVRT. And in fact, there's the Downs Burnett Cycle Trail, which starts at Crow's Nest and goes up to Kingaroy and includes bits of the BVRT on the way back. Fantastic. So if you're not getting enough adventure from the BVRT, just look around, because there's heaps of places to get adventure on your bike. But the better the rail trail gets, the more people get to ride it, and the more people become bike riders and get hooked on bike riding, this amazing sport that we love. And so I think I don't really care about whether it's an adventure trail or not. I care about getting more people on it.
I think I agree with that, because
Lots of people don't agree with that, but that's okay.
I think I've come around to it. I mean, in the early days, it absolutely was an adventure.
Yep.
And
it was.
Long grass and pushing through creeks. I mean, I started riding the southern end from all the way from the main line through Walkaracka before it was the rail trail.
Before it was opened, yeah.
And it was an adventure, but I have seen that progression and the popularity, and it's like, well, this is something for everyone.
Yeah.
And there are, I do adventure trails, exactly that. So I started in Esk, went out through Emu Creek to Blackbutt, and then back on the rail trail.
Yep.
Fantastic adventure day out in the middle of the boonies. And the people that ride up to Linville or more, and then keep going and go up to Jimna through
Monsaldale Creek. I've been that way, yep.
Yes, many wet feet crossings on that. So, it does take a little bit more effort. But, I'm on board with that. I think rail trails for everyone. And, the mad adventurers can go and find adventure anywhere they want.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't stop them. They're going to find adventure. But I think it's really good to have this stepping stone being available to everybody. But I think, one of the things it's nice if there's a community around the sort of gravel space that starts to be a bit more exploring other options. And I think that's starting to occur. I think that's becoming more popular. And I think, being able to ride up to Jim. There's also from Linville, you can ride up to Nanango by a back way as well, up River Road. So you can do a loop. It's about 120 k's from Linville. It goes up. You can go one way up through the rail trail to Yarraman, and then the link road to the link trail to Nanango. And from Nanango, you can head up the hills that take you to the top of River Road, which then is a road back down to Linville. That's a very solid day out. I do it over 2 days. I did a recent adventure where I started at Linville, went up the range, had a bakery
stop in Blackbutt, but then I crossed to the southern side of town and went back through Benarkan State Forest, and there's some lovely hoop pine stands in there, and just added the adventure that way. It was rough and rugged, and so there's lots of value adds, and I think as those value adds become more known, they add to that experience. And a little guides or a few little blue triangle bike routes like the Crow's Nest one.
Yep.
And that's the evolution of the rail trail.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I think it gives people more reasons to visit. And so if the trail itself is becoming easier, use it as the gateway to other things. I'm sure you guys know Siobhan Arrowsmith, who runs Brisbane Rail Trail Refuge at Linville. She's mapped out a whole lot of rides from Linville that are really adventurous. So, yeah.
And I think there's still on the cards Mount Esk, possible trails.
Yep. There's going to be that. Latest I heard there was some more funding for whether it's actually for construction or maybe it's just for design of the trail network there. That seems to be pretty likely to progress.
It reminds me a bit of Bright. So in Victoria, again, going to the national champs is an excuse for me to travel to places and ride them. But Bright is on the Beechworth. There's a rail corridor.
Yeah, it's the Murray to the Mountains rail trail.
Yeah, and you do the mountain biking.
Yep.
In the town, ride to the next
Yep.
down the trail. Do those mountain bike trails. It's a great way.
It's a great rail trail. It starts at Wangaratta and finishes at Bright and goes through Beechworth. Well, you actually spear off the trail to go to Beechworth and you come back again. But yeah, it's wonderful.
So, do you know how many rail trails you've done? Can you name?
Oh, can I name all the rail trails I've ever ridden? Jeez. No.
Because I was thinking that the closest rail trail to Brisbane is the
Samford Valley Rail Trail?
Samford Valley. Thank you. Lanita Rail Trail.
Yes, Lanita Road. So, and
Any news on possible extension into Samford?
yeah. Look, I think it looks positive. So, Moreton Bay Council has bought that little bit of land from where it finishes and becomes Peterson Road.
Yep.
So they've bought one of those properties, which connects through to Samford Road. But the next idea then is how do you, once you get there, because you still have to cross the creek, where the Scout place is.
Yes.
So probably have to get across Samford Road into the Scout area and maybe build some sort of low-level crossing of that creek to get you to Cash's Avenue, which gets you into Samford. So there's still a little bit
So
more
it's a matter of cash. This is what you're saying.
Everything's a matter of cash. But no, so Moreton Bay Council's pretty keen on that. I was pretty excited when they actually went ahead and there was quite a few. It wasn't just us asking them to buy that bit of land, but they decided
very
to buy it.
popular. I go that way quite often to get between Samford and Ironbark trails.
Yep.
And finish my ride, or if I'm feeling really adventurous, go up Camp Mountain, and then it's like coffee
at Samford.
And then you whiz on down the rail trail, and it's like, and I've got to climb the last hills and share it with cars.
Yeah.
Are there any other little trails to give people a taste if they want to try one out? I know there's one up at Wamaran.
Yeah, so from Caboolture to Wamuran, and then from the other side of Wamuran, you can continue on minor roads pretty much to Woodford. But there's a little section of that is on the rail corridor, but most of it isn't. So that finishes at Wamuran. There's
coffee at Wamuran. I had one there the other day.
All right. I agree with that. Yeah.
So
there's a pretty exciting program with project that Logan Council has from Bethania to Logan Village. So that's received funding and will commence construction, or maybe even has commenced construction. So that one's been in the pipeline for a long time. There's a retirement village, or two retirement villages that are built kind of over the top of the rail easement in Bethania. They've been a bit of a barrier or a sort of hurdle to convince that it'd be okay for the rail trail to go through the middle of them. The folks who live there weren't best pleased with that, but I think that's all been sorted, and hopefully they're not throwing things at you when you ride through there.
It is village. Tough. There are people that bought properties adjacent rail corridors with the impression that it would never be used again. And so there are houses. There's a section on the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail just outside of Harlan, from memory, where the trail diverts, goes over a large hill, and there are a couple of adjoining properties that are immediately adjacent.
Yep.
And, it'd be like having people ride past your back window. So
yes.
It is a challenge, but while they remain in public ownership, there's always opportunities there.
And so this Bethania to Beaudesert, well, the line goes Bethania to Beaudesert. Scenic Rim Council are super keen on their end, but really it's only the last 8 Ks or so that are in Scenic Rim. So that's mostly Logan Council. And so they've got funding to do Bethania to Logan Village. There's already a little trail that goes from Logan Village into Yarrabilba. But then Logan Village through to Jimboomba and then down to Beaudesert are all on the cards in the next 5 or 6 years. I would think so.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a great and because that one is on the urban fringe, that section from Bethania through the sort of outskirts of Bethania. The first 3 or 4 Ks of that will be sealed, and then it'll go to a gravel surface after it leaves the urban form.
And they're great ways for kids to ride to school.
There are several schools that goes right past. Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a little rail trail at Canungra, the Canungra Tramway.
Yes. Now, I've never actually seen this one, and there's also one in the city of Gold Coast itself as well. There's a tunnel somewhere.
I raced my mountain bike back there.
Of course you did.
That's how it was a brownfield site. And, we raced right past it. I think it might be walled up. Actually, and of course, there's a tunnel at Samford as well. The rail trail, the Lanita rail trails extend past the city of the city, the town of Sanford.
Yep.
It extends on the north side, and you can still ride it.
All right.
And there's actually a tunnel there.
Oh.
You can't go through the tunnel. You have to climb up a huge hill and go over it. But yeah, that trail continues to extend past Sanford. And
What's the tunnel that you raced Quad Crown over
Landsborough.
Ewan Maddock Landsborough area?
And it
yeah.
is Dullarch National Park.
Yeah.
And the train line was moved further east and straightened. So, yes, that's another one that you can go through. It has microbats living in it.
Yes. Well, the one on the Casino to Bentley section of the rail trail down there, they put the rail trail over the top of the tunnel because the bats have moved in and the bats like it to be quiet. Thank you very much. So we're not putting the rail trail through the tunnel there. We're going over the hill, which I think is fine.
Nice sign of
makes it more
respect to the wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah, microbats are beautiful little animals, like flying mice. I have horseshoe-nosed microbats that live out in the bush where I live at Mount Crosby, and they've been known to come and roost in the garage while I've got the garage door open at night.
Wow.
It's like, what? That's good. Yeah, so bats in the house. Trying to think of the other trails. Did I briefly touch on the Mount Crosby Tramway last episode?
No, talk about that.
So the Mount Crosby Tramway used to rail coal to the water treatment plant at Mount Crosby.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it is now SEQ Water have put a water supply pipeline through the the Mount Crosby end, and then when it meets the motorway, you can't cross it, but there's a section that's a formed road.
Yep.
Just before it meets the Warrego Highway, and on the other side, you can see in the cadastral parcels where it continues, and it goes back to the railway workshop at Ipswich there.
And see, this is it's all part of our built environment history, isn't it? And this is what I think is really cool about rail trails generally, is they are reminders of what we've been up to for the last 150 years in this place. So, yeah.
Yeah.
They're very special to a lot of people. Yeah.
It's one of those ones. I think there's another one that goes out to 1 mile.
Yes, in Ipswich.
Ipswich, and most of that corridor still
exists.
And it'd be great. There's another creek at 1 mile. It's hard to get over, but another corridor of movement for people separated from cars. If we want to make obesity is an epidemic in this country, we want to get people out and exercising, walking the dog, cycling, riding, scootering. We need to make it easy for people to do that. And rail trails are a great way of getting people out. And, once kids are on bikes, then they're on their BMX, and then they're on the mountain bike, and they ride into work. Or, all of these things are building that, more people cycling more often.
Absolutely. And every opportunity that we have in the urban form that is a pre-existing, space where we could build a path, we need to maximise those opportunities. And Ipswich, 1 mile is one of my favourite places because we used to have a cyclocross race there.
First Queensland cyclocross state champs were at 1 mile on the gridiron field. Was it a gridiron
That's
field?
a rugby field of some sort. Yeah.
Yes, and we used to cross through Hepatitis Creek, as it was called. It was a water drain.
One of the guys from the Ipswich Club at the time was a doctor, Scott Curtin, and he named the creek Hepatitis Creek because his view was there'll be people needing to go and see their GP after this race.
I think the first year was dry, but there was an infamous wet one there where
maybe
it was
about
proper
2010 or so,
cyclocross.
2011 maybe.
Yeah.
It was very soggy.
We've touched on all the races and disciplines for a rail trail episode. We've gone everywhere.
It's the rail trail, aka cyclocross. This was his covert way of bringing cyclocross.
Well, gravel bikes are a thing now. They're just. What's your gravel bike?
2007 Specialized Tricross.
And what is it really? It's a cyclocross bike. Yeah. But the main organizer of cyclocross, the person who put a lot of effort into it is a guy called Brad Norman in Brisbane, and he used to say, I should get a cut for all these cyclocross bikes that are being sold at all these bike shops, because for a while there was one shop in Jindalee that was selling all these Focus bikes, and there was another shop that was selling Cannondales, and he said, I should be getting a cut, but now it's become gravel bikes. He should be getting even more of a cut.
There was a very brief time where people started doing Monster Cross.
Yes.
And Monster Cross was a gravel bike, but it had bigger, fatter tyres. and mountain bike style gearing and proto gravel bike. And then the industry came along and went, that's saleable.
We had a dude who used to race A grade in the Brisbane cyclocross scene who had a Cannondale that he had converted to being a drop bar. So it's a Cannondale with a lefty, single speed. So he had single speeded his 26-inch Cannondale hardtail that had a lefty, and he would race it in A grade, and he was super strong dude, but single speeding on around the cyclocross course, which is fine at Nunda, maybe not so fine at some of the other courses. Samford, for instance, bit of a challenge, but.
I had a single speed pit bike at Samford. I raced there and I was getting well and truly pasted.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, hang it. I'm going to just crack out the single speed. Ironically, I went faster. I didn't have a choice. I had to pedal harder up the hills. But cyclocross is actually, I think the single speed worlds. No, I think American cyclocross their cyclocross. They have a national single speed cyclocross national champs.
I do, and that's the one where if you win, you have to get a tattoo.
It's very single speed thing.
Yeah, it's a single speed thing.
Cool.
That's another episode, another podcast, the single speed episode.
Yeah, I have things to learn.
They're
Well,
weird
actually-
single speeders.
So one gear, many speed.
All right. Yeah.
Andrew, we do have a question from
Oh, okay.
fan, but before we get to that, I have one more for you. You like to experience rail trails with a bikepacking bike.
Oh, yes.
Can you give a few quick tips for someone who has no idea or is keen to try but never really known where to start?
So bikepacking is just a modern term for going somewhere on your bike for more than a day. So any bike is good for bikepacking. There's a lot of BS around bikepacking and what you have to do and don't have to do. Do whatever. The best bike you've got for bikepacking is the one you already own. Generally, if you are saying to me, I want to buy a bikepacking bike, I'd say don't do it. I'd say the one you've got will be fine. Go for a few rides, go for a few overnighters, just try out the bikepacking life, if you like, for a while, and then work out what works for you. My bikepacking bike is a hardtail mountain bike with a rigid fork. So it's a 29er with a rigid fork. And I think
It has a history of spontaneous disassembly, doesn't it, Andrew?
That bike has had a few bad moments.
Did you break a fork mid bikepacking?
I did, but that was on a different bike. But yes, one day riding up. How do you know this? One day riding up the VVRT, this is a long time ago, maybe about 2012, and we were going to do an article for the Bicycle Network magazine, which at the time was called Ride On. Anyway, so we're going to do an article because the BVRT was quite new, and we rode from Linville up to Blackbutter, where we're just near the magazine hut, and I'm riding along with my friend Emma is beside me, and we're just riding along chatting, and suddenly it's like I rode into a big hole and ended up on the ground. I'm going, what the hell happened? And the forks on my touring bike had just collapsed and broken, both of them simultaneously in the same spot where there was a pre-existing stress fracture on them from other nonsense that I must have done to them. And so, I was lying on the ground and Emma's saying, what the hell just happened? And, it was quite fun. But, no, that's not the one I'd take bikepacking anymore. Right. Mostly I've got this other one that I've...
A 29-inch.
A 29er that is now I've got a rigid carbon fork.
I also have to thank Andrew for getting me into bikepacking. He sold me a tent.
Yes, I'd got a better one, and so Oppy bought the old one.
So I'm 6'2" and a bit, old money. I reckon the tent is
6'1".
But it might make it work,
It's
perfect
pretty tight. Yeah.
I thought he was going to say I bought a better one that doesn't leak now.
No, that one holds. Yeah, that one keeps the water out for sure.
Yeah. So how do you carry your equipment? That's sort of my main question.
Oh, okay. So the bike that I take has a big bar bag on the front, and that usually carries like sort of stuff to do with electronics and the food you want for the day, and maybe some layers. I have a frame bag. Frame bags are hard to buy. You kind of have to get them made for your particular bike.
What's a frame bag for the uninitiated?
Just a bag that goes in the main triangle of the bike, and so because main triangles are all different sizes, it's really hard to get a standard sort of sized frame bag.
You got any shout outs for your custom bag builders?
Well, both of the frame bags that I've had made were just made by friends locally, but Bike Bag Dude is the main frame builder in Australia, and he's a really good guy. He's from New South Wales.
So you send him a cardboard template of what the shape is inside the front triangle,
and he sends you back a bag once you give him some money.
Yeah,
That's cool.
And then, there's all sorts of ways of carrying stuff. I just have a rear rack with a couple of small panniers on it.
Yeah, okay.
And, that seems to work okay for me. So I managed to sort of get all of the stuff for a full camping setup with that amount of gear. Yeah, basically bike packing, bike touring, travelling by bike, you want to work out what you don't need is much more important than what you do need. So only taking what you actually need. So basically you end up with, you wear the same kit every day, right? This whole idea, I'm going to have spare this or that. No. It's just more weight you don't need. So you wear the same kit every day. You wash out your nicks every night. You have a set of off-bike clothes, one set, and a set of on-bike clothes. And that's pretty much, that's the same whether it's a 2-day trip or a 2-week trip or a month-long trip. So, you want to sort of only have what you need. And you look at everything that you take, and after every trip, you look at everything that you take and go, "Do I really need that?
Did I use it? Whatever you didn't use,
apart from like sort of safety things, maybe there's some snake bite kit, first aid kit sort of things you want to carry and not use. But mostly, if you didn't use it, don't bring it next time.
I would say that the best tip for when we've moved, this is a rail trail tip. Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, you can catch the train to Wulkuraka, or actually to Ipswich, or probably to Ipswich, and ride to the start of Wulkuraka.
Yep.
And then the towns are perfectly placed, and there's even a shuttle company that'll pick you up at Wulkuraka and take you to a far point you can ride back. But the towns are, if you want to ride slowly, you can ride one town per day, or you can ride 2 towns, get lunch. So breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that's one of the great ways to start. It's a low threshold. You're not that far from Brisbane. It's a great way to get into backpacking.
If you don't have the camping gear, you can stay at a pub.
Stay at pubs. Absolutely.
Pubs, motels.
Jump on the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail website, or, some of these rail trails have some really well-detailed maps and information on their sites. So jump on and find some info and join some Facebook groups and see what others are doing. Get inspired, get on your bike and have some fun.
And then when you've done that, eventually you can say, I'll take the train to Gympie, and you can ride from Kilkevin back to Ipswich.
That's one of my goals. I've done the furthest I've gone is I've gone the town Warrullen, I think.
Warrullen, yep.
Warrullen. So I've been from as far north up the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, done the Yarraman to Kingaroy link, which has got bike.
It's got blue signed,
direction signs.
Yep.
And then up as far as Warrullen.
There's a really nice guy in Nanango by the name of David Kenny who organised those signs. He's a Bicycle Queensland member. And he was just concerned because early on when people were mapping out routes between Yarraman and Kingaroy, they missed out Nanango. They'd go straight through a bit of forest and miss out Nanango. So he very quickly realised, no, we want people to visit Nanango. And so he mapped out a route that includes Nanango, and it's the one that's the marked route. Smart man.
Yeah, I can also recommend, now is it, it's not South Nanango, but you can deviate off the route and go through the hoop pine plantation, which is beautiful.
Oh, gorgeous.
So you can add value.
And my sneaky tip for if you want to take the train to Gympie and ride back, because Gympie to Kilkevin is not nice. There's no good route between Gympie and Kilkevin. But if you do it on a school day, if you stay the night in Gympie and the next morning You go to Purse's bus company, they have an empty bus that goes from Gympie to Kilkeven first thing in the morning because it's bringing school kids back in. And so for $10, you can get on the empty bus and go from Gympie out to Kilkeven to start your ride.
I think that's a brilliant tip.
You can only do that.
That's knowledge you'd only get here on the Mountain Biking and South East Queensland podcast, folks.
So it's good fun.
There's a caller question here from Anne. If you, Andrew, this is for you. If you had $200 million and you were placed in charge of rail trails right here in South East Queensland, where are you going to spend that money?
Do I have to spend it just on rail trails?
After you've gone on a fun weekend and
No. There's just sort of cycling infrastructure needs all over Queensland.
I'll allow you to choose how you would share and distribute those funds. Yeah, sure.
Somebody made me transport minister tomorrow, and the premier agreed with everything that I said. Look, I think that there's for cycling to be more accessible to more people, there's a few things that would make a difference to that. Certainly, separated bike infrastructure in major cities is super important. Finishing off some rail trails would be great, and the Boyne Burnett one would be the one I'd love to see finished, but also I'd love to see the Atherton rail trail extend up to Herberton. It goes from Mareeba to Atherton at the moment, but getting up to Herberton would be magic. I'd like to see the Maryborough to Harvey Bay trail finished and made better. But if you were giving me $200 million, I'd spend it mostly in cities on infrastructure. And if I was the Transport Minister and the Premier agreed with everything I said, I'd also make the speed limit on local roads lower, because then more people would be able to ride to their local destinations without feeling threatened by the speed of the motorised traffic around them. And so I think, for me, when we're talking about how we move around in our cities, we mostly try to go too fast, and we're mostly moving at a speed that is not conducive to other uses. And so if we're saying we want more people to be active, we want kids to be active, we have to give them the chance to do so. Most parents don't want to let their kids ride on our streets at the moment because they think it's too unsafe, and I kind of agree. But the way to address that is lower urban speed limits. So local streets, the streets that don't have a centre line, I think they should be 40 or 30. At the moment, they're mostly 50, and that's if you're in an accident if a car collides with you, that's not a survivable speed. And for it to be safe for kids to ride, it should be a survivable speed when you come into contact with a car. That's really upbeat stuff for the for the mountain bike podcast.
I will say that one of the just to put some extra info on that, if you lower the travel speed, you significantly on those, like from 50 to 30, you don't significantly increase the travel time.
No,
because you stopping at your intersections and things like that is what really drives up that time. And so it can be done with very little impact on motorists. So I think that's the hesitation from the community is that, it'll make...
We'll never get anywhere. Yeah.
It doesn't... But
that was a great response, and I'm sorry Anne didn't send in a check with $200 million for you to go ahead and do that. But
I think it'd cost more than $200 million
sure.
by the way the infrastructure that we've
done all the easy quick wins.
Oh yeah,
all that's left.
It's hard stuff.
Why is cycling infrastructure so expensive? It's because the only bits we haven't built are the bridges, the boardwalks, the expensive stuff. If it was quick and easy, we've pretty much done those.
You have a look in any park in Brisbane, there's any creek alignment, there's a bikeway there because that was a cheap place to build bikeways. It's not great when we have wet summers, but that's where we've built them.
Yeah. And the history of that is a lot of these started as recreational pathways.
Yes.
I'm thinking
Kettle Brook.
Yeah,
Bulimba Creek,
yeah. And when you look at the money that's spent on our major arterials, if only we just put a little bit more on the edge while we were building them, because the cost to go back and build the V1, the Veloway 1, which is the equivalent of like Highway 1 for cyclists. Yes, the bridges on that.
Been a lot, yeah.
Andrew, I'd love to ask you 100 more questions. We'll finish with one more.
Yeah.
Do you have any events coming up on rail trails that you know of?
This is the questions I get asked are beautiful questions. Thank you so much for the question. Next year, Bicycle Queensland's running 3 events on rail trails. There'll be a weekend at Wandai on the Anzac Day weekend in April 2025. There'll be an end-to-end over 3 days on the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, and that's in July. And if Mike Blewett will kill me that I don't know the dates, but the dates are on the Bicycle Queensland website.
We'll put them in the show.
They're also on the screen now. No, post
In post, yeah.
And in October, on the King's birthday weekend in October, we're going back to the Boyne Burnett rail trail and having an event at Mundubra. So that'll be pretty cool. So it'll be on the bridges section, not the tunnel section. So between rides around Mundubra back towards Gayndah, and that'll be in October next year.
And while you're at Wandai, check out the Wandai mountain bike trails or Gordon Brook Dam.
Yeah. No, certainly McEwen Forest will be in the offering of rides there. Jason Wyeth from the South Burnett Mountain Bike Club is one of our key people in
I've raced
Wandai.
there many times.
Yeah.
It's
That
great.
was surprisingly fun trails for the Gordon Brook Dam ones on a mountain bike. Great fun.
Yeah, decomposed granite. It's fantastic, and there's rock outcrops. Queensland state titles were there this year.
A month or 2 ago, yeah.
Well, this might not be relevant in a mountain bike context, but one of the other interesting things for the weekend at Wandai is some really great off-bike things you can do. So we're going to have a ride from Wandai to Cherbourg and a visit to the Ration Shed Museum at Cherbourg, which is a fascinating place. It tells story of Indigenous people's history in that part of Queensland from sort of the 100 years from 1920 through to 2020 in a really fascinating and quite impactful way. And so that's something that not many people had the chance to experience, and I think that'll be really exciting. There's a museum in Mergen called 55 Million Years Ago that is about the fact that just near to Mergen is a site where they've discovered fossils, a fossil record from 55 million years ago, which is after dinosaurs, but before our current mammals evolved. And so it's the gap in between when marsupials are just coming into Australia and they're the sort of precursors of our current animals. So that's really fascinating too. So it's some really cool stuff that you wouldn't expect in places like Mergen and Wandai. Some really interesting things to discover just to go along for this weekend.
Come for the rails, stay for the fossils.
That's fantastic. I can't thank you enough for being with us tonight, Andrew, for coming over.
Great fun.
I'm proud to say we've all been on our bike today as well.
Yes. Woo.
Thank you, Oppy, for the pre-podcast ride.
This is Lachie's training scheme. We
right.
pre-pod training.
Every time.
We're here to inspire, and it aligns with BQ. More people on bikes get inspired, myself included. Chat. This is what we do after a ride. We chat and we, inspire ourselves to do new adventures.
Rail trails are a great gateway to get people out on their bike, and then from there, it's a step into mountain biking.
Absolutely.
Do you want to wrap us up before you hit the green play button there, Oppy? Final words.
No, I think. What can you add to Andrew's expertise?
Nothing.
No. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Have to have him back.
Yeah, to talk all things cyclocross, the Cyclocross podcast episode.
We'll just wait till we get towards winter and we can actually go.
Well, it's winter in Europe at the moment. This is
one of our problems for cyclocross.
We're supposed to be wrapping it up.
Yeah, one of our problems for cyclocross in Queensland is we don't get the right weather, and we're happy when we get a rainy race, but we really want sort of cold rain. That's what you want.
Classic
almost
cyclocross.
Freezing. Yeah.
Make sure you subscribe so you're notified when the next podcast comes out. But thanks again, Andrew. Thanks again, Oppy. Until next time, keep
Ciao.
on riding.